Join our knowledgeable hosts as they dive into the captivating universe of comic books, movies, TV shows, and pop culture. Get ready for vibrant discussions and a shared enthusiasm for all things superhero and beyond. A comic podcast straight from the panels. This is Beyond the Capes.
All right, everyone, welcome back to another episode of Beyond the Cape podcast. With us today is Gabe Cheng of Gabe Cheng Comics, and we're here to talk about his new project. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. Glad to be here.
All right, so how long has it been since you've been on kind of the comic scene? Because you have quite a few titles if you go to your website out.
Yeah, I've been doing indie comics since 2017. My first one was called For Molly, where I did a limited series that turned into a graphic novel. And I did the Kickstarter for that trade paperback, I want to say last year. But since 2020, I've been focusing not just on finishing that limited series, but also doing a series of short stories. The one that brings me here today is my kind of last in that series. It's called Stuck in the Middle, and I wrote 6 short stories during 2020, during the height of the COVID lockdown, and yeah, I've been producing them and putting them on Kickstarter and having good success with it, and just like writing comics that I really enjoy and I think are cool. So
Awesome. Now, one of the interesting things that I found is you are obviously the writer behind these stories, and you've had the same artist through all these issues. Is that just a unique relationship to you? I mean, is that just someone you found and like you guys just said, you know what, let's just keep moving forward? Everything just kind of clicks together.
Yeah, I mean, yes, for sure. Her name is Elisa Meneghel. We've done 5 short stories together. She actually hasn't done all the stuff with me. I've worked with 2 other artists, but similar stories, and we can start with Elisa because she's amazing. I've met all of the artists that I've collaborated with through Upwork, which is just the freelancer job posting website, and had really great success. I mean, not just with the books, but with variant cover artists. I've been able to find great artists on Upwork. So Elisa is she's a younger artist. I think that when we first connected, she had either just gotten out of university or within the last couple of years. She lives in Florence, Italy. So she's full on Italian. And she just has a great work ethic, is very communicative, and is very good collaborator. And I wrote a short story called Love at First Bite, which was just a little 9-page short story where I was still kind of experimenting with what'll happen if I do a short story and hire an artist and put it up on Kickstarter. And I was connected with her through Upwork, and her art was just perfect for it. She was just amazing. She added so much to it, as far as backgrounds and colors and just so much love and emotion into it that I had to keep working with her. I was so excited to keep working with her. So Love at First Bite was the first one that I wrote. Then I wrote a spin-off comic for my other comic For Molly called Into the Wilderness, which is the second one that she did with me. And then I started actually writing for her, where I was like, okay, I'm going to write something to Elisa's strengths.
Yeah.
Really fun, really challenging her to come up with crazy things. Like the third thing that we did together was a parallel universe story called The Problem with Parallels. And it was like, all right, here's what these, it's about 2 interdimensional traveling brothers who are on the run from interdimensional assassins. And they have to kind of solve their problems that they have with each other in order to survive. So I have these 2 assassins, and it's like, okay, here's what they look like. They're like Deadpool meets Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. All right. It's like, now I want a samurai version of them. Now I want a giraffe version of them. Now I want clown version of them. So
nice.
Throwing stuff at her, like really fun, parallel universe humor stuff. And she just nailed it. Nailed every single thing. I had a whole, there's a panel in that book that is in the warehouse of an interdimensional cartel thieves. and it's like I just listed out all of the like valuable things I could think of that someone would steal if they had access to parallel universe traveling. So it's um like a bunch of Michelangelo's Davids, a bunch of Venus de Milo's, a bunch of like, and she just nailed it. It was just perfect. Like there's cups that look like the Holy Grail. I had a couple of jokes. It's like Mozart's bones and like like just random things that you would steal if you could travel between parallel universes. And the warehouse is just awesome. And so yeah, I wrote this one. Stuck in the Middle, definitely for her in mind. I'm trying to think of the other ones that I wrote with her in mind. We did another collaboration together in a horror anthology on a comic that's called the Night Shift, and God, I can't remember what the other one was. But anyway, so it has been a real pleasure working with her.
Yeah.
She's just great. Her art is incredible, and yeah, and this one, Stuck in the Middle, I did the same thing where I challenged her, like, I wrote some crazy things like, hey, there's a fight between an angel and a demon, and the angel is using his like the demon is using a fire breath to shoot fire at the angel, and an angel is taking water out of a swimming pool with his angel powers, which I don't know what that is, but like to to counter the fire. And it's like, it's just such a cool panel. And then on top of that, and some of this stuff is on my Instagram, I did another cup. The angel, who's kind of a recluse, shut in, stuck on Earth for a couple centuries, is really just bored and spends his time decorating sugar cookies that all look like teddy bears, but different types of, like, different occupations of teddy bears. So I would just send her like, hey, this teddy bear needs to look like a king. This teddy bear needs to look like a Supreme Court justice. This teddy bear needs to look like an astronaut. And she, like, that's all of my instruction. And she just nailed it every single time. Like, no notes, like, perfect. And so, I mean, as you can tell, I just can't say enough good stuff about Elisa. She's just so incredible. And it's a pleasure working with her. And I'm hoping that, she keeps saying yes when I ask her if she wants to do a comic with me. So I guess she likes working with me, or I hope she likes working with me. And so I hope to keep working with her for a long, long time.
Yeah. Well, one of the best things about Stuck in the Middle was the teddy bear scene. Just seeing the many different costumes. That was probably one of my favorite details in it, which you could easily blast through the pages if you don't like notice really quickly. But that fine detail, especially for comic book readers like ourselves, I mean, I think that's something that always sticks out to us, is those fine details, and those are always critical to nail down. Which obviously you guys have a really good back and forth, which is critical, and then why you've been able to do so many comics.
Yeah, definitely. And it's all through email, which is just like, it just speaks to her ability to communicate, her ability to and this is English as a second language for her. She's, like I said, she's Italian. So I'm sending these long run-on sentences with the, like, I try to like reduce my colloquialisms as much as possible. But yeah, this is all through email. So the fact that she's able to do such great work with just my crazy scripts and my random pictures that I send her for references, and my run-on sentence descriptions of what I'd like. She's just incredible. It really is.
Definitely. And like I said, your writing style definitely has a very unique style to it. Was being a writer always like a dream for you, like starting out, or is this something that kind of mixing and matching through high school, college, or experiences that you found yourself kind of sticking to?
I mean, I've always loved writing. I mean, when I was a little kid, it was like definitely an outlet for me, writing short stories, and I tried to write a novel in high school that was very derivative of a bunch of movies. And so yeah, I mean, it's always been something that I've loved to do, even when I was a little kid. And then in college, and then after college, I kind of put it down. I kind of like focused on the professional stuff, the adulting stuff. And it wasn't until I started teaching that during my summer and spring breaks, I would start to write screenplays again. I would just kind of bang them out and work on it, and maybe I'd get one done a year. but it was something that was an outlet for me. It was a creative thing for me when, when it's stressful being a high school teacher. I don't do it anymore, but it was a way for me to kind of let my creative side kind of run free. And when I stopped teaching and I had made a determination that, I initially I was like, oh, I want to be a writer for TV professionally. I want to try to do that. And so I stopped teaching. I moved to LA. I was still in Southern California, but I moved to LA to try to do that. And quickly I realized that wasn't quite the path that I wanted to take. And it was really like, and then discovering the indie comics community in Southern California, I was like, actually, this seems like a lot of fun. This seems like a really cool outlet and just a really cool community and a really cool way to get stories out there quickly, and to do my own stories and to do things that I would like to read, make comics that I myself would like to read. So that was the big motivator for that. And so I took this screenplay that I wrote and turned it into, like, it was called For Molly. And like I said, I turned it into a limited series and then eventually a graphic novel. But yeah, I mean, I've always loved writing. I can't really imagine myself not doing that, not having that outlet for all of my creativity, which is, yeah, it's a thing.
Yeah. Now, have you always been a comic book fan and reader, or is this something new to you in that sense?
That's also kind of like come and go. I mean, I read comics a little bit when I was a kid. I was never really connected. I was very much like kind of an isolated, very introvert, still pretty introverted, but like so I never found like an LCS or a good like comics community or other friends that were reading comics. So I read a little bit. But it wasn't really until college that I started to get back into comics again and reading more of, getting back into Batman. That's where it started. But then I started to read more indie stuff and going to cons and meeting people. So reading like small press stuff and stuff like that. So, yeah, I mean, it kind of comes and goes. I think that I'm probably not as up on it now as I was like 5 or 6 years ago because I haven't had a chance to read as many of the new comics coming out. But I try to stick with the writers and the artists that I like and pick up their stuff when I see that they're writing cool new stuff. Like I think that I don't think that I'm unique in the fact that I do tend to follow writers more than I tend to follow characters. Whereas like Jeff Lemire or Tom King or somebody like that is doing something, I'm like, oh, okay, what's this? It doesn't necessarily need to be Marvel or DC or something indie. So
yeah, and I mean that's always a mark of someone that's kind of made a career of themselves. Because I know I've been talking to one of the new guys that I think is going to be great is Patrick Horvath, who did Beneath the Trees.
Right.
It's who would have ever thought to take the busy world of Richard Scarry and make a Dexter style comic of it. And it's done great. And he's just he's one of those people that, people will follow him because of the great storytelling, which is great that you kind of have that to fall back on. Cause I think some people, especially in the indie scene, they're like, man, if I could just get my hands on like a Batman, which it always helps brand recognition, but focusing on being known for telling a certain style of story even is more crucial than just putting the big names into your comics.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, who's going to say no to writing, a big character like that? But at the same time, like, it's just fun to write stuff and to put out stuff and to come up with new ideas, which is another thing that I've enjoyed about doing the short stories is that I've been able to jump around between some genres and explore some different ideas and come up with some different characters as opposed to, being focused on one character, which is, there's nothing wrong with that. There's a lot of writers and artists out there that do that. But for me, it's been a lot of fun to kind of jump around.
Definitely. Now the one interesting thing is, luckily I've had the pleasure of talking to a lot of indie creators recently. COVID definitely helped with that. I'm very happy to see that. And it's funny because a lot of you guys have a very strong writing background, and you have a lot of short stories, poems, screenplays. Uh, did you also have very, I wouldn't say hard difficulties, but was it more complex when you tried to convert it to a panel style format? Because I know that was that was definitely difficult for a lot of them.
Yeah, no, it was a big deal. And I made a lot of mistakes. You know, it was not only was it my first time adapting a finished screenplay that I had done into panels, into sequential art. It was, it was my first comic book that I've ever done. So I made a lot of mistakes, and I learned a lot from it. So I'm very thankful for that experience, and having to be able to complete that experience, as getting the whole book done. But yeah, I mean, there was a lot of stuff where um I really had to think about, okay, what is um well, first of all, it was learning that, if you write a screenplay, I think the intention is, and again, not as a professional screenplay writer, but my understanding is the intention is that you want it to be understandable to a lot of people.
Yeah.
That anybody that picks it up is going to get essentially the same idea about it and what's going on. Whereas what's nice about a comic book script is that it's really only like a long instruction manual to one person, and well, in my case, it's one person because the artists all do lines, colors, and inks. Um, well, Elisa doesn't do the inks, but Ben, who did For Molly, did lines, colors, inks. So it was just one person that I was writing an instruction manual to, essentially. So switching that over in my head was one of the things that definitely made it easier and has definitely informed a lot of my other writing, because it's like, okay, just make sure that it's understandable to one person, and it's very, very clear, especially to a person that it's going to need to draw stuff and like going to need to know what kind of atmosphere and color schemes I want for the backgrounds and things like that. Like, just make that very clear, as opposed to giving a feeling or a general sense to things. Don't be afraid of being specific. But also don't be afraid of, like, hey, if you're like telling an artist, like in a note or in the script somehow, like, hey, if you have an idea for this, like, go, like, run with it. Like, I'm open to all your ideas. So yeah, that was a challenge, and that was an interesting learning experience. And it was a lot of like thinking about what makes sense in motion and what makes for a good action scene in motion, and then taking that to, okay, what's actually going to make a good panel, a frozen image. And that was a fun challenge for sure, where it was like, okay, what's going to be exciting about this part where a character goes tumbling down a hill, or a character jumps off a cliff, or there's a fight between For Molly is about talking dogs and humans living in the New Jersey forest. So it's like a fight between a bunch of dogs and a bunch of humans. Like, what is that going to look like on the page? And that was definitely fun, thinking about what I wanted to be big, what I wanted to be like little transitional stuff, what I wanted to have no background, what I want to have a lot of background and be a splash panel. That was a lot of fun. And the other thing that I would say was challenging, but was also definitely a good learning experience, was pacing, where instead of having really long conversations, especially long conversations where people aren't moving and they're just in the same location, and also, again, it's a human and a dog, so it's like eye levels up here, sorry, my camera, eye levels up here, dog's eye levels down here. Is like, how are you gonna like angle it so that, like, we constantly in an upward angle looking at the human and downward angle looking at the dog? And it's like, so we got to shorten this, we got to move it around, we got to make sure there's a page turn moment here at the end of the page. So that was all a great learning experience. And I just circling back to one of the biggest mistakes that I made, and I think that, I'm still very proud of this book, but like For Molly, specifically issue 1, takes a really long time to start. It takes until about page 10 or 12 that the story actually starts. Before that, it's all set up in exposition. And it's like, looking back on that now, I'm like, I understand in a screenplay, 12 minutes, i.e., 12 pages of the screenplay is not a lot of time. But in a comic book, it's like, get to the point, dude. Like, let's get this started. Like 12 pages is way too long. So, so that was one of the biggest lessons that I learned. And of all the, but again, it was a good experience, and it definitely has made me a better writer, moving forward.
Yeah. Especially pacing. A lot of people laugh at me when I say like that's huge for me, because I mean, you could read a Game of Thrones book, but there are like 4 chapters where I just don't ever want to read them again. I would, if I could, I'd tear them out of the book, because it's just someone walking around like serving a feast and talking about what they're planning to do for next summer. I don't care about that. The other one that I always found interesting is when we had on the show David Avalone, who does Images, Elvira. One of the things that he said that I never thought about is, he said, learning your odds and even pages, because he said, if I have you start on page 1 and you turn it, you're going to immediately see page 3 before you see page 2. So I don't want to put something on page 3 that's going to ruin it, so you don't even want to look at page 2, because it jumps right to the action. And just trying to really figure out that layout is very critical. And I think a lot of people sometimes overlook just how much work you guys put into like every single square that goes on that white page. Definitely.
Yeah, definitely. There was and I was very focused on that for Stuck in the Middle, because, and it's especially challenging for me because I have so few pages. I go in with the intention of writing a short story. I need to keep this to 13 to 17 pages. Like I can't spend a bunch of panels like with a guy walking from one part to another. Like that's got to be, I got to figure out how to get that into like 2 panels. So there's a part in Stuck in the Middle where it's a one-sided you only see one side of a conversation with the main character Dante in his apartment in a 6-panel grid on both pages. So I had to make sure that like we're just seeing Dante, 6 panels, so 12 panels total, and it's the left side of the page and then the right side of the page. Because once you turn it, the big reveal is, who is he talking to? And it's, surprise, it's this character. So yeah, that was definitely a big thing in that one, and fitting that page turn moment of like the conflict of that scene is, he is sitting down, somebody knocks at the door and he doesn't want to get up, but the guy at the door is trying to get him to get up. So having it be so that it fits into these 6 panels on 12 panels, and then at the very end he's like, all right, I'm going to get up, and then so that leads to the page turn. And having it be in that spread, it's like that was the challenge, and that was a fun challenge, and I'm really happy with those pages.
Well, speaking on that, I mean, one of the reasons that we're here is your current project, Stuck in the Middle. How did you come about with this story? Where did it all originate? Because obviously you had quite a few short stories, you said, kind of in the works.
Yeah, I wrote a couple of short stories during the COVID lockdown between 2020 and 2021. And this was actually, I think it was the second or third one that I wrote. But it's the last one that I've now produced. And this one, it comes from a couple of places. I really have always liked angels and demons in fiction. I have, whether it's in comedy or in action or dramatic stuff, I really like that genre or that subgenre of fantasy. I think it's kind of cool and interesting, especially in angels and demons in the modern world. So like a Hellblazer or a Dogma or Good Omens or Miracle Workers, like that kind of stuff has always interested me. So I've always kind of wanted to write an angels and demons story where it was kind of like, all right, especially where it's like, all right, an angel that is kind of a curmudgeon that is trying to live in a boring suburban kind of, existence, but can't die, so he's just there forever. And so that was the origin of it. And then being in being in lockdown and COVID, and being isolated and having things being very, very repetitive, that's where this idea for this story kind of came in of, you know, feeling isolated like an angel that is, you know, quote unquote, stuck in the middle
Yeah.
between heaven and hell, and can't get back to where he wants to go, which is heaven. So he's just sitting, whiling away the centuries, complaining to his neighbors, drinking and decorating sugar cookies. So because that was the feeling, and it was at that time, at least for me, where it's like, you're stuck. We cannot go anywhere. Couldn't change jobs. I was looking for a new job at the time. It was very, very hard. It took me a long time. I eventually did, but it took me like a year and a half to find a new job. Couldn't change apartments, again, because I couldn't afford it. I was trying to find a new job, and there's really nowhere to go. So that isolating feeling, I tried to capture that in the script, and going back. Oh yeah, going back to the scene with the 2-panel spread that's all 6 panels. I wanted to really emphasize the repetitive feeling that we all had of like, okay, getting up, doing the same thing again. We can't go anywhere. We just have to stay in our apartments. We have to work from home. We're not driving. It's just the same thing over and over again. So I really wanted to have that scene where, and I told Elisa specifically, like, you're going to want to move the camera, or quote unquote, you're going to want to move the perspective so that this is slightly different panel each time or more interesting, but I don't want that. I want it to look repetitive. I want it to look tedious. Like, this is how Dante is feeling right now, where it's like everything is so repetitive. Everything is so the same every single day. So this is what I want the reader to be feeling as they're going through these panels. It's like all the panels are the same size. They're all from the same perspective. You never see the other person on the other side of the door talking. You just see Dante's side of it. So that's where it came from. It was capturing that, and working in that subgenre, and also the challenge of trying to make like a kind of a jerk character kind of funny, and the heroic main character of it. That was a fun challenge to me, to try to have a like I said, a reclusive, curmudgeonly angel be the hero, and be the person that everybody's kind of on his side, at least, you know, by the end of the comic. So yeah, that's where it comes from.
Yeah. Well, the nice thing too about a lot of people try to do the demon that's fallen and they're stuck. So it's nice to see the duality of an angel. The other thing that was the best part of that was every angel was always like, oh, you know, they fell for some like holy reason, or they take. But he's just like, yeah, I made some really terrible mistakes at some work parties, and I guess I'm getting punished. That is fantastic, because I feel like I think some people are just scared to tackle something like that, just because it's not common. So I don't think they know where to go with it. They have no references. So that was great to see. I don't know if that was intentional or just you thought it would be funny.
I just definitely thought, like, thinking of heaven, and it is very much influenced by miracle workers. It's like thinking of heaven as just this like huge um huge infinite place with huge infinite number of angels. You know, like, one of them has got to be like your disgruntled
Yeah.
coworker that like just hates coming to work every day, and like, you know, um has been at it forever, and is like, you know what, I'm just clocking in and clocking out, man. I'm just whiling away the hours. Like, so who is that angel, and who is that character? And, you know, what happens when he, you know, there's a bunch of jokes in there that I don't want to spoil, that are like what happens when he's such a screw up that he gets kicked out. And yeah, so that's definitely where that came from, because like the super like righteous, wrongfully accused
Yes.
angel of like, I was framed and then I was kicked out. Now I need to defeat this demon in order to fix everything, or else heaven is going to be destroyed or something. Like, that's fun for like an action
Yeah.
movie or something, or an action comic. But I really wanted to do something that was like, just yeah, like I said, just the curmudgeonly jerk, the guy that hates his job and was probably not very good at it to begin with, and he's the one that's stuck, that got kicked out.
Yeah. Now, what I am interested in is, obviously this is a short story. Obviously it's gonna be your Kickstarter. But the way that you end this comic leaves us so much room for what could happen next. Is it ever a problem, like sometimes writing these short stories and then seeing the final comic and you're like, man, I could probably do another 3 issues of this?
Yeah, that is a problem, but it's also by design, where I want
Yeah.
it to be like leave the reader wanting more, which is a good position to be in. Um, so and leaving things open ended where um there's some place to return to if the idea kind of strikes me, because there is, yeah, there's plenty of stuff to do in this world, and it's the same with all my other short stories, where it's like there's plenty of stuff to do in a world where you can travel between parallel universes, or you're an alien trapped in a Mad Max world, or you're a vampire kind of living in the modern San Fernando Valley. Like um they're not closed off, because while I don't have any plans to continue them now, they're always there, and I can always, open those up again and get back into those worlds with Dante and Mario, or etc. Um yeah, I mean, I appreciate you saying that, for sure, because that was by design. Like I said, I
Right.
want it to be like, I definitely don't want uh, my readers at the end of it to be sick of the characters, and
Yeah.
which is even especially worse if it's 17 pages, where it's like, wow, I really screwed up there. So yeah, the goal is always leave them wanting more, leave it open in case I do come up with another good idea, and never say never, because I do love these characters, and I would love to see a lot of them and kind of where they go after the initial story.
Yeah. Now, having finished some of these, and then going back to your one comic where you said, I mean, you had 2 people with breaking into an interdimensional vault, essentially.
Yeah.
Have you ever considered, like, man, I essentially could have probably already started my own multiverse?
Yes, I have thought about that, and if you look at my comics, and actually, hold on, let me see if this page is on the. So there's a page on the Kickstarter from Stuck in the Middle, where Dante is punching Mario through across the courtyard of the apartment, and we see there's a pool there, and there's 2 people that are by a pool in the apartment complex. Those are that universe's version of the assassins from The Problem with Parallels. Like I said, the
Yeah.
Deadpool meets Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid guy. So there's already crossover in between the comics. Like these things exist. There's the difference is that, like, I'm keeping my 4 Molly stories and these stories very separate, so there's no
Yeah.
crossover between those. Um, but there are little crossover moments in between all my comics, because I'm like, okay, like, yes, we can travel through parallel universes. Crashland's one of my other ones, is set hundreds of years in the future, because it's Mad Max. But there's still little hints of other characters in there as well. So things can come together. Things can come together. And I don't, like I said, I don't have any plans for it right now, but I love these characters, and I love the art that Elisa did for it, and I would in the back of my mind, I'm like, okay, there's ways to have a Crisis on Infinite Earths version
Yeah. Awesome.
of my universe, of, like, bringing them all together, even if it's just for a couple of panels for some of the smaller characters, or some of the ones that kind of don't make sense in certain stories. But there's a way to do it, and I'm thinking about how to do it in the back of my mind, even though it's not the next thing I'm going to do. But it's like, okay, these are characters that I really love. I mean, and another example, specifically talking about Elisa, is that in my vampire story, which is called Love at First Bite, I had the idea of little vampire imps, like just they look like just little demons that are like pint sized, just running around and doing the bidding of the evil vampire. And when the evil vampire is defeated, they all the imps are kind of still there. They're kind of just hanging out. And so they end up popping up in The Problem with Parallels, the parallel universe traveling story, because they travel through the Love at First Bite universe, and then another demon goes through a parallel universe portal into another universe, and then he starts like there's a couple panels where he's like running around like, oh, what, and then like runs off the panel. And I told Lisa, I was like, I feel like I need to write a little mini comic of this demon like in this random universe, and like how did I get here? So, and that was entirely because of her. It was her idea to have, and the design of the demons was mostly her. We kind of workshopped it a little bit back and forth, but the demon in the other universe, like that was entirely her idea. And I think that it would be fun to explore that with her because it's such a good idea.
Definitely. Now, as an indie creator and having all these projects, one of the things I always find it interesting to ask is, what was it like? And maybe it was for Molly, you said was your first one done.
Mm-hmm.
To actually hold a physical copy, like with all the artwork, like in your hands.
Oh man, that's a good question. It was a mixed feeling, and it was a moment where I really did need to. I did need to like force myself to pause and be like, you did this, like take a minute to be proud of it, because of course as somebody who's my own worst critic, one of my initial thoughts was like, well, this could have been better, that I still don't love that panel, this line of dialogue is a little corny, I wish I had done like we were talking about a minute ago, I wish that I'd started the book at 5 pages instead of 12 pages. But it was a good feeling. It was a good feeling of like, I accomplished something. I finished something, it was a great feeling, like putting out that first issue, but it was a daunting feeling at the same time, knowing, okay, I have 3 more issues that I want to do for this. And it took 5 years, 4.5, 5 years to do it. And so it was a significant amount of my life. It was a significant amount of toil and obstacles and learning experiences, going from, I initially wanted it to be a web comic and thought I would put it up on Webtoons and things like that. And it didn't work out that way because I didn't know anything about those. So and there's nothing wrong with it. It's just like, I don't read web comics, so I didn't know how to write one. And so I transitioned it to a print comic, and it was a good moment. It was a good moment. And I was very happy with it. I'm for as much as there are things that I wish that I had changed about it, that I had done differently, that I'm sure everybody feels about their first comic or book or painting or whatever, like, I'm incredibly grateful for all of the things that I learned from it.
Yeah, I mean, that first issue is always critical. I mean, whenever anyone, I mean, we go back to our first episode we did of this.
Yeah.
I already hate the sound of my voice, let alone anything else. So listening to that first episode was terrible. I'm like, oh man, I didn't have a good mic. I had no editing software. This was a terrible thing. But knowing that I made an episode, it was on every podcast. We got on Apple, Spotify, everywhere.
Yeah.
And same thing with comic books. I mean, it's that first step. It feels like you just made so many mistakes, but you're already 90% ahead of everyone else because they're never going to take that first step. They just backed off.
Yeah, 100%. It's just giving yourself that credit, giving yourself that like that moment of reflection, like, like I said, you finished it, you did it, and that feeling is it's definitely fleeting and it's hard to grab a hold of, because like I said, you look at it and you see your errors and then you're thinking about the next thing, but it's like you got to give yourself that credit, you got to give yourself that validation, because some people go to their graves with their song in their hearts still, and it's like, no, you got to let it out, man, you got to do it.
Exactly. So we have this issue coming out with Kickstarter, which we'll go through in a little bit, where to find it on the links. But after you're done with this and having written so many short stories, what is the next step for you kind of in this process? Continuing with short stories? Or are you looking now to get into something a little more, I don't want to say deeper, but more of like a serial continuation? What's the next step?
Well, it's actually both. It's I'm gonna try to do another limited series that will become a graphic novel. That's going to be, and each issue is going to be about 17, 18 pages. So it'll be shorter issues, but it'll be something that is a longer form story. But at the same time, they're going to be stories that are more episodic, I would say, that are more contained, so that
Yeah.
you don't necessarily, it's not like every single one is going to have a huge cliffhanger, and it is going to be telling a larger story, but it's more of like and more of like in the way that like Futurama tells a larger story. Like I'm a Futurama super fan. My brother and I did a Futurama podcast where we went through every episode. I have a Futurama tattoo on my arm, which is a difficult angle and upside down to get at on camera. But so I'm really inspired by that and the new episodes of that to kind of try to write my own version of Futurama, where it's an ensemble comedy. It's something that is it's not so much just science fiction based, but it's like it's kind of exploring the subgenres of science fiction and fantasy that I really love, and having the freedom and elasticity to kind of jump between some genres, but using the same characters, and kind of following a very sitcom-y structure to it, where it's like, okay, this character has a problem, they attempt to solve it, they don't solve it, then they regroup and they attempt to solve it again, and they fix the problem. So that sitcom format, but in the way that Futurama, I feel like, did really well, of having the sentimental aspects to it, of having the really great characters that are they're relatable, and having emotional moments and emotional moments between characters, or between the main character and people that are no longer there, whether it's in the past or whatever. So I'm trying to write my own little Futurama universe. And so, but like I said, sticking to the short story format. So gonna be quick, gonna be jam packed, like just challenging myself to just fill every page with something fun and new, and not letting an opportunity to have a joke in a background go away because like it's only 18 pages. Don't have this one have no dialogue, which is, again, is not that's not wrong for people to do, but it's not kind of how I want to do it. And yeah, so it'll be, I right now I'm planning it to be 4 issues. Gonna try to shop it out to publishers, which will be a new experience for me, another learning experience for me. But definitely gonna be on Kickstarter, and gonna be a fun experience. It's it's gonna be called This Seems Normal. And that's, I think, at the moment, all I'm ready to announce about it.
Exactly. All right. Well, we look forward to that. But in the meantime, we have Stuck in the Middle. So where can they find you? Where can they find the link to your Kickstarter? What is the deadline for this Kickstarter?
The best way to find it on Kickstarter is just go to kickstarter.com and search Stuck in the Middle. It should come right up in the comics. Stuck in the Middle. Oh, let me read the full title of the campaign here. Stuck in the Middle, a one-shot action comedy. You can also go to GabeCheng11comics.com. On the main page, there's a link to the Kickstarter, and you can preview some of the pages for Stuck in the Middle on there. It's the same ones that you can preview on the Kickstarter page, so it's all the same. Or you can find me on Instagram at Gabe Cheng Comics.
Awesome. And for everyone listening, we will have this on our Instagram as well, and link to the YouTube comments below. So just click on the link and follow it there. Gabe, thanks for coming on the show. Thanks for talking about this comic. We're excited to see what this does and see what you do in the future.
Thanks, man. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
All right, everyone listening, you can watch this on YouTube or listen to it wherever you get your podcast from. Follow us at Beyond the Cape Podcast on Instagram. Also follow our guest here, Gabe Cheng Comics, on Instagram, and we'll talk to you next time. Everyone, have a good night.